Hi there, and these comments are for Tai Ha, and you made a comment over at Quora.com. You requested that I answer this specific question. The question is, what does a score of 30 look like in the TOEFL IBT writing section? And that is what I will answer in this particular video. I will focus first on the independent writing task. I will show a model essay that shows how to answer that question, and secondly, I will show a model integrated writing task to show how to answer that kind of writing question. Let's take a look at a common topic for an independent writing task on the TOEFL exam. When people succeed in life, it is because of hard work. Being lucky has nothing to do with success in life. Do you agree or disagree with the quotation above? Use specific reasons and examples to explain your position. I will now read a sample response of a student who answered this particular question from my online TOEFL course. And I think it's important to hear it. It's important to hear it out loud so you can feel the writing. You can see how the writer has structured and developed this particular essay. Now, after I'm done reading it, I will go to the IBT rubrics that are posted online, and I will look at the specific requirements for the 5.0 out of 5, and I will discuss why this essay meets that criteria. Nowadays, many self-help books or novels with subliminal messages help people become successful. Similarly, several conferences, videos, and workshops about the best way to achieve success have been frequently published on television. However, nobody is able to explain how success is exactly achieved in life because it depends on many factors. Although many external variables affect a person's success, a particular attitude will significantly help to achieve it. Hard work. Personally, I agree that people succeed in life due to hard work, and being lucky has nothing to do with their success. Persevering and always doing my best will help me to achieve success, and both attitudes are consequences of hard work. To endure in one's studies, an important step to be successful is very related to hard work because it means to repeat a particular action many times, if it is necessary, until it is done well. For example, in the academic field, if I failed a biology exam, I would have to retake this exam again until I could pass it. In fact, if this exam were the final exam, I might have to retake the course in order to develop full competency over the subject matter. Without a doubt, a great number of study hours would be needed to improve my performance. Hence, hard work is mandatory in order for me to be academically successful. In addition, to do the best I can every time is important to be successful, considering that it guarantees an ideal performance, especially when complemented with suitable instruction. For instance, if I want to score high on the TOEFL exam, it will be instrumental that each time I take a practice test, I do the best I can by applying all my previous knowledge, and each time I retake those practice tests, I have the same attitude. However, it will also be useful to have a good mentor who will do his or her best to help me identify my weaknesses and to give me suggestions in order for me to minimize or eliminate my problem areas. Consequently, if this kind of instruction were not included in my preparation process, no matter how many times I retook the exam, I would never improve my performance on that test. In fact, that was what happened to me a few months ago. Therefore, the importance of hard work again is highlighted, since both my mentor and I will need to do the best we can in order to foster success. After having shown the importance of persevering and doing the best I can in classes and when preparing for the TOEFL exam, both of which involve hard work, undoubtedly, hard work is one of the main causes of being a successful person. And I'm going to put a semicolon right here. Hardly ever does being lucky have something to do with success in life. And there we go. So this is an example essay that will score 5.5 out of 5 or 30 points out of 30. So the question is, what is it exactly that makes this essay score 30 points out of 30? The independent writing rubrics as scoring standards that ETS has set forth for this type of writing, there are several things that this essay does and does very well. Number one, this essay effectively addresses a topic and the task. How do we know this? So first of all, if we look at the thesis, it says persevering and always doing my best will help to achieve success, and both attitudes or consequences of hard work. The writer also says here, personally, I agree that people succeed in life due to hard work, and being lucky has nothing to do with their success. So it's very clear when we look at this thesis that the writer is framed around the purpose of the writing task. So that's definitely one thing that tells me the writer is addressing the task. Now, that's not enough. If we look at each particular topic sentence, let's go highlight these in red. Let's just look at the beginning of this sentence here. It says, to endure in one's attitudes, an important step to be successful is very related to hard work. So this idea of hard work, this was already mentioned in the topic, it was restated in the thesis, and it's repeated once again in the topic sentence of this body paragraph. So again, it's very clear that the writer is addressing this task. Let's take a look at the next one. We'll highlight this in red. So the writer says, in addition, to do the best I can every time is important to be successful, considering that it guarantees an ideal performance. So doing the best I can is also important. And if we take a look at the thesis, it says, doing my best will help me to achieve success. And this goes back to the hard work idea here. People succeed because of hard work, right? So it's clear based on the thesis, based on the topic sentences, I think, of paragraphs 2 and 3, and then even at the end, it's very clear if we look at the conclusion here. The writer again restates the purpose of the writing. So the writer says here, after having shown the importance of persevering and doing the best I can when preparing, both of which involve hard work, actually the comma works better here. It says undoubtedly hard work is one of the main causes of being a successful person. Even this particular sentence here, let's highlight this also. So it is clear, because the writer has a thesis, as we see here. The writer has two different topic sentences in the body paragraphs which restate the purpose of the thesis. And at the very end, in the conclusion, the writer again reminds us of what the purpose of this writing task is by saying hard work is one of the main causes of being a successful person. So based on that, the writer has effectively addressed the topic and the task. Now, the next thing, the writer is also well organized, right? And the writer displays unity, progression, and coherence. So the organization, I also talked about that as I was answering the first question. Because the writer has a thesis, and because the topic sentences restate the different parts of the thesis here, and because the writer also restates the purpose of the writing in the conclusion, we can say the essay is well organized, right? Now the other one is well developed, so we need to illustrate why this essay is well developed, and it also relates to what's called unity and progression. So let's take a look at one of the actual paragraphs. So let's just take a look at the second body paragraph, and the writer is giving a particular example here. So let's say, for instance, if I want to score high on the TOEFL exam, and this example starts here, and it goes all the way until you see a few months ago. Now, how many words is that? The writer spends 132 words developing one specific example. Let's read it. So the writer makes the argument in the beginning, says to do the best I can every time is important because it guarantees an ideal performance. Then the writer says, for instance, if I want to score high on the TOEFL exam, it will be instrumental that each time I take a practice test, I do the best I can by applying all my previous knowledge, and each time I retake those practice tests, I have the same attitude. However, it will also be useful to have a good mentor who will do his or her best to help me to identify my weaknesses and to give me suggestions in order for me to minimize or eliminate my problem areas. Consequently, if this kind of instruction were not included in my preparation process, no matter how many times I retook the exam, I would never improve my performance on that test. In fact, that's what happened to me a few months ago. So we can go back here and we can say that the writer definitely has good development. The writer uses clearly appropriate examples, exemplifications, and or details. The writer does that in both of the body paragraphs. Right? So far we've talked about why the essay has addressed the topic. We've talked about why it's well organized, why it's well developed. And because it's developed, obviously it has progression. And if it's organized, it has unity. But what makes it coherent? Right? Let's look at that particular idea. Coherency means it's the connectedness of the ideas both at the paragraph and at the essay level. We can say the essay is coherent and cohesive. So what is it exactly that makes this essay coherent and cohesive? So I can illustrate this by looking at one particular paragraph. So let's look at a few things. So first of all, the writer uses the word in addition, as you can see right here. Why does the writer do that? The writer is adding to the previous idea in the previous paragraph. So by using the transition word, the writer is able to connect the two paragraphs together. But that's not enough. The writer also says to do the best I can is important. Right? And that is a repetition or a repeating of what was said in the very beginning in the thesis. It says here, persevering and always doing my best will help me to achieve success. And both attitudes are consequences of hard work. So the writer in the thesis says doing my best, and then the writer repeats that idea in that third paragraph, in that body paragraph here. So it's sometimes by repetition, the writer is able to connect, I think, old and new information together. By using, in addition, the transition where the writer is able to connect the previous paragraph together with this paragraph. But then, when the writer starts to move through the essay, notice some of the transition words. Let's make these in blue for a minute. And this is also important in making the paragraph organized. So we have, for instance, we have one there. We have another. We have consequently. Consequently is also important because it shows cause-effect relationship, and the same thing with therefore. That's also cause-effect. When we use for instance, we use that to introduce an example. Remember that in order to be coherent, a writer can do at least one of four things. The writer can use transition words, which we see. The writer can repeat things already mentioned, and we see that when the writer does to do the best I can. The writer can also use determiners and pronouns, I think, as a way of connecting old information together. We even see that when the writer says, it uses the word those, for example. So each time I retake those practice tests, so that is a kind of like a pronoun that's used to connect old and new information together. So that's also effective. So we can see through this particular paragraph, the writer does have a very important requirement to score high. The writer has a coherent type organization. Okay, lastly, let's take a look at the last thing. It says, displays consistent facility in the use of language, demonstrating syntactic variety appropriate word choice, and idiomaticity, though it may have minor lexical or grammatical errors. Idiomaticity just means that it has natural sounding type grammar and vocabulary. So the writer also does well in this area. So let's look at syntactic variety for just a minute. I'm not going to try to illustrate every point here, but let's talk about why this essay has good syntactic variety, right? Let's take a look at one of the particular paragraphs here. So in one of the paragraphs, the writer says here, to endure in one's studies, an important step to be successful is very related to hard work because it means to repeat a particular action many times if it is necessary until it can be done well. So in this case, we have what's called a complex sentence. It's a complex sentence because of two things, the word because and the word if. Both of these are subordinating conjunctions. So the writer is able to connect these two dependent clauses to the main part of this sentence, and even to add more syntactic variety, the writer uses an appositive. It says to endure in one's studies, an important step to be successful, which kind of modifies the subject, and the subject of the sentence is actually to endure in one's studies. This is an infinitive. So the writer definitely has syntactic variety, right? So that's also important. Now we can also take a look at vocabulary. The writer seems to have a pretty good control, I think, of vocabulary. So let's take a look at some of the words that the writer uses here. The word ideal, that's a good word. We have the word complemented. We have suitable. We have instrumental, is a good word when you mean important. So all of those words are effective, I think, in helping the writer to explain his or her points. So we can say when we're looking at this part, the writer definitely has good syntactic variety, the writer has good word choice, and the kind of grammar and vocabulary that the writer uses is natural sounding. So what does an independent writing task look like that scores 30 points out of 30? What does it look like? It looks like this essay here. It's exactly what it looks like. Now for more information, you can go to my online TOEFL course at onlinetoeflcourse.com. Now let's take a look at a model integrated writing task. We'll do the same thing. What does it look like? So if a writer gets a score of 5 on an integrated writing task, what will it look like? So here's the topic. How does a lecture cast doubt on the information in the reading passage? And like I did before, I will read it, and then we'll go back to the IBT rubrics for the integrated writing, and we'll explain why this essay meets the criteria for 5. For businesses to be successful, the reading passage recommends that all employees participate in all meetings, read all the materials, and bypass the steps of writing process when writing reports. But the lecture questions the efficiency of these suggestions. First, the professor claims that the number of employee meetings should be limited and short. According to him, meetings longer than 60 minutes might be unproductive since workers usually stop paying attention, especially if leaders spend too much time covering introductory topics. He recommends that instead of calling a meeting, workers should try to deal with issues using emails or making phone calls. In addition, they should either decline going to the meeting or inform participants they will leave the meeting after 60 minutes. However, the author in the reading passage argues that companies need to schedule as many meetings as possible since they are an excellent way of dealing with problems and staying current with modern work-related technology. Second, workers do not have to read reports entirely according to the speaker in the lecture because it might be a misuse of time. According to him, only small portions of each report are probably important. He thinks that focusing on main ideas is a more efficient way of reading a report. In contrast, the reading states that reading materials given to employees will help them perform better at work, and that it is recommended that they read them completely instead of primarily looking for main ideas, as the professor suggests in the lecture. Lastly, to help employees become more efficient writers, the professor suggests that they follow the steps of the writing process. When it comes to writing reports, the professor explains that workers should not initially try to write in perfect and complete sentences, since it will take too long to complete the reports. Instead, for the sake of saving time, he proposes to make an outline, write a quick draft, and finally revise and correct the mistakes. However, the reading states that reports should be written all at once, since separating the steps in the process wastes time. Ultimately, the lecture casts doubt on the reading passage by stating that having frequent and long meetings, reading all reports in detail, and writing reports all at once will in fact make businesses less efficient and consequently less successful. At the ETS TOEFL Integrated Writing Rubric Scoring Standards, there are some things about this essay that I just read that will make it score 5. So let's take a look at what the description is first, and then I will kind of explain this and how it relates to the essay that we just read. A response at this level successfully selects the important information from the lecture and coherently and accurately presents this information in relation to the relevant information presented in the reading. The response is well organized, and occasional language errors that are present do not result in inaccurate or imprecise presentation of content or connections. So the writer is talking about the information in the lecture and showing how it relates to the information in the reading, right? So how does the writer do that? Let's take a look at each paragraph. So let's make the lecture information blue, and we'll make the reading information red. So the lecture we make blue here. This is more lecture information. And this is important. We have to make sure that we're including information from both sources. We can see that. And even in the conclusion, or actually let's go to the last point here. And then we have the lecture information in the conclusion. Now let's take a look at the reading information. We'll make it red so we can kind of see what's going on. Let's keep going here. The main thing is, it's very easy to see when the writer is talking about the lecture and when the writer is talking about the reading passage. Am I right? So how do we know? How do we know here? We know because the writer says in the red here, it says the reading passage recommends, so then we know that all this information in the red is coming from the reading passage. Now the lecture, we know it's the lecture because it says the lecture questions the efficiency of these suggestions. So the writer is using what I call voice markers. Voice markers are very, very important. And maybe we can make these voice markers we can italicize them, right? And that also helps us understand where this information is coming from. So here we have the professor. We also have here, according to him, another voice marker, which tells us this is a summary. We have he. We have recommends. We know that is also coming from the professor. And then we have the author in the reading passage. This is a voice marker which helps us understand that this is information coming from the reading. When we go to the next paragraph, we have according to the speaker in the lecture. This is a voice marker which helps us understand this information. We also see another voice marker. It says according to him. We have the word he thinks. And then when we move to the reading, it says the reading. The reading states. And even here, we have here, he states that reading materials given to employees will help them perform better at work and has recommended they read them completely instead of primarily looking for main ideas as the professor suggests in the lecture. And again, this is also important. So let's continue. And I'll go to the next point in just a minute. We have here the professor, which tells us this information is coming from the lecture. We have the professor explains here. We have he proposes, which goes back to professor. And then we have the reading states. We'll put the reading here, reading passage. And then we have here the lecture, which helps us understand that. And then we have the reading passage over here. So what do we see here? Let's count them. Let's visually pay attention to how many voice markers does the writer use to acknowledge the information from the reading passage in the lecture. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we have 18. So let's go back to the criteria for this. So it says, the writer selects the information from the lecture and coherently, accurately presents it in relation to the reading. So it's pretty clear, because of the 18 voice markers used throughout this integrated writing task, we can see which information is coming from the lecture and which information is coming from the reading passage. Now here's another question. Now the accurate thing, you guys don't see the reading passage or the video, so you may not know this, but it's important that the writer has accurately, right, presented the information from the reading passage and the lecture and has not left out any important points. Now the next thing is the response is well organized. So what is it about this essay that makes it well organized? in order for this essay to be organized, the writer has done a few things which really make everything connect together very well. So the first thing is a thesis. And remember that with the integrated writing task, unlike the independent writing task, it doesn't have to be really wordy. You don't need 100 words or anything like that. It's very short. In fact, if you look at the introduction here, how many words is that? 39 words only, but the writer says, for businesses to be successful, the reading passage recommends that all employees participate in meetings, read all the materials, and bypass the steps of the writing process, but the lecture questions the efficiency of these suggestions. So now, when we take a look at each paragraph, we can see, for example, the second paragraph focuses on the employee meetings. And that relates to the first point mentioned in the thesis. When we move to the next paragraph, it talks about reading reports, right? When we look at the thesis, it talks about read all the materials. So you see a close connection between what happens, I think, in each of these body paragraphs. And then the final paragraph, the writer says, the professor suggests that they follow the steps of the writing process, and we know that the point in the thesis here is to talk about the steps of the writing process here. So each paragraph only focuses on one of those key points and shows how the lecture and the reading passage relates to that one key point. You see that? So that's one way. So the writer is able to achieve a really well-organized essay by having a specifically focused thesis and then repeating the key points of the thesis in the topic sentences of the body paragraphs. That definitely helps to make this essay organized. But the writer is not done yet. The writer also uses transition words. For example, in the first body paragraph, the writer says first. In the second body paragraph, the writer uses the word second. And then in the last body paragraph, the writer uses the word lastly. And that also helps make these paragraphs connect together very well. In addition, there's other things the writer does, because in each paragraph it's critical. Because the writer follows a logical kind of organization. So what this writer likes to do is, in each paragraph, the writer talks first about the lecture and then talks about the reading passage. And notice, when the writer moves to the information in the reading passage, the writer uses the word however in that second body paragraph to show how the information in the reading is different from the information in the lecture. Likewise, when the writer moves to the second body paragraph and when the writer moves from the lecture and then talks about the reading passage, the writer this time uses the word in contrast. Again, to show that the information in the reading passage is different from the information in the lecture. Finally, in the last body paragraph, again, the writer uses the word however to show how the information in the reading is different from the information in the lecture. And then the writer has a conclusion that restates the purpose of the writing task. Notice, it says in the question here, how does the lecture cast doubt on the information in the reading passage? Notice how the conclusion restates that purpose. It says, the lecture casts doubt on the reading passage by stating that having frequent and long meetings, reading all reports in detail, and writing reports all at once will in fact make businesses less efficient and consequently less successful. So it's very clear in the conclusion that the writer has restated the purpose of the writing task and has even restated what we see in the writing task here. So all of this helps to give this essay a very, very nice organization. So finally, you have occasional language errors that are present do not result in the inaccurate or imprecise presentation of content or connection. The writer here has no language errors. The writer has very good control of vocabulary and grammar. And that's why this essay will score 5.0 out of 5 or 30 points out of 30. So in conclusion, in this video, I have just answered what, and let me go back to the actual question. I've just answered the question, I've just answered the question. Actually, let me go back here. Give me a quick second. So I've just answered the question of what a score 30 looks like on both the integrated and the independent writing tasks of the TOEFL IBT exam.